Welcome all of you to our final Jepson Leadership Forum program for the season. We will have another one next season, and we'll talk to you a little more about that later. I am Gil Hickman. I am a faculty member in the Jepson School of Leadership Studies, and we are really happy to have all of you here today. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speakers. Our speakers really have had an influence on me. First of all, since I lived for 21 years in California, I certainly was there during the time that our Speaker, Mayor Brown, was governor of California. In addition, after moving to Richmond and being here for 10 years, Mr. Robert Bobb and also Dr. Calvin Jamison have been a part of the Jepson School and a part of my life as well. So we are really excited to have them here. We have had a number of programs thus far and some wonderful speakers. Jonathan Kozel has been here, and he was speaking, of course, on education. Andrew Young on economic development and what worked in Atlanta. Robert F. Kennedy on protecting the urban waterways. And tonight we have an opportunity to hear about one of the most creative and inventive leadership teams to lead Oakland and to lead it into a major turnaround. I know that all of you know our speakers because they are such public figures, but I would like to give a brief introduction, and then we will have a short film about Oakland, and our panel will then take over. First of all, on our panel, we have Jerry Brown, who is currently mayor of Oakland, as you all know, and former governor of California. He's a native Californian, born in San Francisco, studied at the University of Santa Clara, and as many of you have heard, at one time was studying for the priesthood. He received a bachelor's degree in Latin and Greek from the University of California, Berkeley, and graduated from Yale in 1964. Mayor Brown has been a member of many public forums and has served in California in many capacities. He has been very active as the governor in job creation and in several major environmental initiatives. After he served as governor for 2 terms in California, Mayor Brown remained very active in the Democratic Party. As you all know, he ran for office, for presidential office, and ultimately decided that he would get involved in politics at the state level. I'm sorry, at the local level. Dr. Calvin Jamison will be our moderator for tonight, and most of you know Dr. Jamison from Richmond politics. I know Dr. Jamison from his involvement with the Jepson School. He has helped us to put together some of our programs and some of our various classes, and has served as a leader in residence at the Jepson School. As you know, he is currently our city manager and has gotten some advice from our next speaker, Mr. Bobb. And I'd like to just give you a couple of the statements that Mr. Bobb gave him in terms of advice. He was interviewed recently by Style Weekly and was asked, some of you may have seen this, was asked if he had any advice for the current city manager, Dr. Jamison. 3 things stood out in what he said, and I'd like to remind Dr. Jamison of these. 1, go to the gym every morning at 5:30. 2, make sure you have some way of taking care of your personal mental health first. And third, you can't take things too seriously. So our presenters have such a distinguished background that their backgrounds could take most of the program. So instead of talking about these backgrounds, I will have them talk, and you may ask your own questions after they give their presentations. We will have a brief film showing the progress that they have made in Oakland, and then Dr. Jamison will take over. Thank you.
If you would, Mike, please join me in welcoming to the stage the Killer Bees. in person, Mayor Jerry Brown, City Manager Robert Bobb. My role this evening is to help facilitate moderating the session, and you came here to listen to, if you would, our two guests. And so what we're going to do is offer an opportunity. They said they wanted to make sure it was very interactive, and we're going to try to facilitate that kind of a role. And mine will be the one to sort of keep things flowing as we go through this process. If you have any questions about any of the issues, any questions, there are mics in each of the aisles. And because this is being taped for replay on WCVE, a local FM public service station, I ask that you would find a mic if you have a question in that regard. Our objective is to allow both of our panelists to talk about their experiences, what we're calling the Oakland Experience or Oakland Experiment, and then also have some real serious dialogue about, if you would, how they work together as leaders. We also have a senior seminar that's here this evening of students who are taking notes and learning a little bit about leadership. And this has been a collaborative effort in terms of leadership that's here. And so without further ado, I am going to turn the podium or the floor over to, first of all, Mayor Brown here to sort of talk about his experiences as he's gone through the transition of becoming mayor of the city of Oakland, followed by, if you would, City Manager Bobb, who, by the way, before I became city manager, my handicap was pretty low, and I was regularly taking money from Bobb. Since that time, he's made sure that it's even Stevens in the process. So, Bobb, I owe you a couple along the way. So, I'll turn it over to Jerry Brown, our guest, and sort of talk a little bit about your experiences as you've taken over that leadership role as mayor of Oakland.
Okay, well, the leadership role, I think that's an interesting thought. As I was listening to you speak, you spoke about the audience, and then you spoke about the students, as though there might have been a separation. And there might be, in the sense that the students are involved in a leadership course, and they're thinking about leadership in maybe a more formal way. And I'm not quite sure what that formal way is, but I'm going to try to offer some thoughts that might satisfy some of the criteria and principles of leadership. When I decided to run for mayor of Oakland, that already was an assertion of leadership because I decided to run. Nobody asked me. So I don't know whether that's a quality of leadership, not waiting to be asked. Just seeing something that was needed and wanted and providing it. Or, putting it another way, seeing a void or a problem and stepping in, rather than watching it and defining it and complaining about it and explaining it, but actually becoming engaged in it. And so I decided to run for mayor, created my campaign, and did succeed in besting 10 other candidates in a field of 11. And just a few days before the primary election back in 1998, I decided it was time to change the rules under which I was being elected, because it was what they called a weak mayor. And I was feeling strong at that time. I didn't want to become weak. So I embarked upon an initiative campaign. And in Oakland, if under the rules, if you can gather 15% of the registered voters to sign a petition spelled out in precise detail, that petition will then be placed on the ballot at the next general election. So I decided to do that. And because you get a lot of people who sign and don't know they're not residents of Oakland or they're not registered voters, you have to get more than 15%. So I launched that actually before the campaign was over, about 4 days before, I think it was, before the election. And some people said, well, this wasn't a very wise move because I was running for an office and already I was expressing dissatisfaction with what the office was and wanted to radically change it. But I decided that the risk was worth taking because if I didn't change it, I'd have to go to council meetings every week. And I talked to the And I talked to the former mayor, or the current mayor at that time, Elihu Harris, and he said, you know, this is the worst thing. If you can ever get out of council meetings, you ought to do it. And I watched the council meetings on television. I noticed that they had 9 people with one mayor. The mayor was in the middle, and the citizens always line up, and most of the time they complain. There are not a lot of people who go to city council to say, boy, it's great. Let's get some more of that. So there's this built-in institutional complaint. And if you're at the center, the TV camera shows the complainer and then shows the mayor. After a while, maybe not the first year, but over time, people associate the problem with the mayor. So it struck me as a very important idea to get out from that position and to get somebody else sitting there becoming the problem. So that was my first bold move, my second move as leader. And of course, not trusting fully to the spontaneous will of the people, I decided to lend this initiative campaign, I don't know, $120,000, which I wrote from my own bank account at the time, and a lent, I didn't give, because I paid myself back through a fundraising campaign. But anyway, I did that, and we hired signature gatherers and all that, which is very common in California. But as it turned out at the end, 4 days later, I was elected with 59% of the vote. I think it was like 50,000 votes or something. And we were able to collect 53,000 signatures to turn in 27 days. And about half of them were from paid signature people, but the other half were just spontaneous citizen groups that all came together, because people did want to change. They felt that something was missing, and they were ready to go the full way and have a strong mayor and a new mayor. So that's what happened. But at the moment, I didn't take a poll, I didn't know about it. I said, hey, we got to make this change. And the change was, of course, that instead of the council form, we became the mayor council form. And that is, instead of the manager being appointed by the council, he's appointed by the mayor. And instead of serving at the pleasure of the council, serve at the pleasure of the mayor. But in order, and this, I don't know whether it's leadership or whether this is politics, but I threw in a few sweeteners, because I knew the central issue is self-aggrandizement and centralizing power. That's the negative. So I decided to add into my Measure X a requirement that no further city council salary increases shall occur without a vote of the people. So that was popular, and they didn't like that at all, because they have never got a raise after that. Well, they haven't dared to present themselves to the people, because just from putting it on television every week and everybody complaining, it tends to lower their credibility. Anyway, we put a few other things. I also put a term limit of 2 terms, which didn't exist before. I decided to term limit myself as an act of self-abnegation, to take the sting away. We increased the power, but we limited its duration. But just to limit the limit, I also put a 6-year sunset clause on the 8-year term limit, so that it would have to be voted again in 6 years. So it was somewhat Jesuitical in the way it was designed. Yeah. But anyway, so that was that. I don't want to get too much more into that, other than the fact I can tell we need to move on here. But it was, so we created right from the beginning, not we, I, with the people and what have you, created this strong mayor forum. And then the beautiful thing about having a strong city manager is that there's not that much for the mayor to do. And I don't have to go to the council meeting, so I don't get blamed for things. He has to go. And I just associate myself with good news and go around, and generally, you know, it's like the Pope. You know, he sits in his Pope mobile and he kind of waves, that kind of thing. And Bob does most of the work, and I just enjoy the glory of the strong mayor.
That's the problem. That's probably a good segue into Robert, your role, because all of your career have worked in, if you would, strong council manager form of government, and talk about change. Won't you share with the public basically what this change meant to you, and then how you address it from Oakland, from your perspective?
I was hired in Oakland in November of 1997, I believe. And at that time, there were 9 members of City Council. 8 of those members, well, 7 of the 9 are still on the City Council. And the City Council, prior to my arrival, had gone through 2 city manager selection processes and could not find the right person to fit into that city, because the city's administrative structure, in the minds of the City Council, and at the end of the day, they were the only ones. Theirs were the only minds that really counted. They needed strong administrative leadership in the city government. And so things weren't moving forward. The City Council basically were the ones who were establishing administrative policies. And any of you who are in our business, there's not a chart here, but if there was a chart, I would draw a circle, much like the Olympic circle. And then there's a gray area. And it is important for the City Council and the City Manager to figure out how to work within the gray area, where there is not clarity as to policy and administrative functions. But in Oakland, the City Council basically had taken over the administrative functions of the city government. And so when I came in as City Manager, part of my responsibility was to take an administrative organization and recapture, as it were, the control from the City Council of the city's administrative structure. Now, it wasn't the fault of the City Council. It was the basic fault was that they had gone through transitioning several individuals who had served in the position of City Manager, and wherever there is a leadership void, someone will fill that void. And so in my first few months there, we did a major evaluation of the city's administrative leadership to determine how many of those individuals who were in key leadership positions could serve in an organization that was in transition, that an organization that was in need of significant administrative changes. Of course, during that time, the mayor who had assisted in my recruitment had decided that he would not seek re-election. And then there was this, newspaper articles every day. Jerry Brown moved to Oakland about 3 years ago. Now he wants to run for mayor of the city. And so we had the Jerry Brown factor out there running for mayor, while at the same time we were trying to change the administrative structures. And in fact, I was driving along using the administrative tools that I developed over the years to change the basic structure of the organization. Not a major reorganization, was to change the administrative structure and the behavior, as it were, of city associates. And while that process was going on, there was also a mayoral election going on at the same time. Then Jerry was elected mayor the next year in June, and then Measure X. So I'm thinking, boy, I'm really working with this City Council, organizing the city administrative structure. And lo and behold, we're now changing from the council manager form of government to the mayor-council form of government. Now, one of the things Jerry failed to mention in his opening remarks is that the City Council had, their approval rating, or public approval rating, was significantly low in the city because of a number of major decisions. Decision to bring the Oakland Raiders, to return the Oakland Raiders from Los Angeles back to the city of Oakland, and to renovate major public facilities to serve the Raiders, the Oakland A's, and the Golden State Warriors. Well, in the Raiders deal, significant public funds were spent to bring the Raiders back. And so City Council was under the spotlight almost every day for spending maybe $200 million to renovate the stadium for the Oakland Raiders, provide $50 million in incentives to the team, and spend about $13 million a year to meet the debt service just on the stadium. So every day there were articles about the bad deal in bringing the Raiders. So they were taking it on the chin. The second issue is that shortly after I arrived, the City Council gave itself a salary adjustment. And they took their salaries from about $32,000 a year to $62,000 a year. Now, I would say the city council there was an ethics commission that recommended the city council's salary increase, and everyone, of course, blamed the city council for appointing the members of the ethics commission so that they can give themselves a salary increase. But the Oakland Experiment is really somewhat unique. The city manager is appointed by the mayor with the approval of the city council, but the city manager can be removed from office by the mayor without the consent of the city council. Also in that initiative of Measure X, we went from an appointed city attorney to an elected city attorney. So our city attorney is now elected and took office in January of this year. So we went from a city attorney appointed by the city council to an elected city attorney. And of course, the most interesting thing that will happen in 6 years, well, not 6 years, in another 4 years, I believe, is that the voters will have an opportunity to determine whether or not we continue with the mayor-council form of government or return to the council-manager form of government. So Jerry is now in the process of running for re-election next March. And in 2 years, we have to decide, there will be an election to determine whether or not our current form of government will continue. But it has been an interesting dynamics of serving as the city administrative officer. I might also add that in the charter change, the powers and duties of the city manager, but for the reporting role, did not change. So the city manager still has the power to hire, to fire, to discipline municipal workers, to recommend a budget, to sign contracts. All of those powers did not change but for the appointment. And the way we collaborate is one of the shields that I've enjoyed is in making significant high-profile changes in those who are appointed in some fairly powerful positions, Chief Oliver, like Chief of Police, a few of the others, we're able to remove from office several high-profile department heads with the public coming in advocating for their favorite department heads. And you can make that decision as the city manager and not worry about whether or not the city council individuals would be there advocating for their favorite person, although he or she may be at the lowest rung of the organization in terms of performance, but may have a very high popularity rating in the community. So we're able to make significant changes. The mayor is there to support those changes. And so our current form of government is working quite well. The mayor, I have complete accessibility to the mayor. That's not at all an issue. We collaborate on every issue affecting not only the administrative functions of the city government, but the body politics. And my role has changed in one very significant way, in that I also serve as a go-between, as it were, on significant issues between the mayor's office, the city manager's office, and the city council's office. I might also add that when Jerry became mayor, we also downsized the mayor's office. For example, the mayor under the council manager form of government had a staff of about, I think, 14, 16 individuals. And the mayor's office had these policy analysts. So every time we'd make a recommendation, we had to, not only were city council members reviewing our recommendation, but you had these people running around called policy analysts. So we had to deal with the mayor, the policy analysts, the city council members. When Jerry became mayor, the mayor's office now, I think, has a staff of about 8 or 9. The other thing that's different under this strong mayor form, which is different from a lot of other strong mayors forms of government, is that I have friends who work in other cities where there's a strong mayor. During the election, many individuals assist the mayor in his or her election campaign. And when the mayor takes office, these people follow, and they find places for them. That is not the case at all in the city of Oakland. There's never been a conversation between the mayor and I to help to hire this individual or that individual because they were instrumental in this campaign. That is not the case at all. The other thing that is significant, and so we've eliminated all of those policy analysts. The staff of the city manager's office provides the policy work for the mayor. So we no longer have that bureaucracy of policy analysts that were in the previous structure. Additionally, in addition to our city council members who are paid $60,000, $62,000 per year plus benefits, each city council member have a staff of two full-time analysts. And so our city council members, so there's a lot of work that needs to take place between city manager's office, the city council's office, and also between the mayor's office. Now there's also another significant change. With Measure X, we went from a 9-member city council, since the mayor doesn't have to attend city council meetings. He doesn't attend city council meetings. But when there's a significant issue on the city council's agenda, and I get these calls on my cell phone, and I sit there and talk to the city council about certain issues. But the city council itself had to change and restructure. We have a vice mayor of the city council. We also have a president of city council. So when we went from a 9-member city council to an 8-member city council, the city council now elects for a 2-year term an individual to serve as president of the city council. So instead of the mayor sitting in the center hearing the issues and the complaints, it's the president of city council who hears all of those issues and actually runs the city council meetings. So we had several things that were in transition at once. Transitioning from a council manager form of government to a mayor-council form of government, and then a transition within the city council itself from having the mayor serve as the chair of the city council meetings to having a president of city council. And in 6 years, if the voters decide to go back to the council manager form of government, then we start all over again. So it's, someone said that the charter change, Mr. Mayor, was inartfully crafted.
Yeah, that's what they said, but actually, since it got 74.5% of the vote, it was very artfully crafted. And it was crafted in such a way that it only took up 1 page. 4 years before, there was an attempt to write a strong mayor initiative, and it went for 20 pages. And that 20 pages, I believe, scared the electorate into thinking there was some massive transformation. So my goal in writing this new measure was to make as few verbal changes and substitutions as possible. So that's why I left the city manager's duties I left them the same, and just inserted enough to enable the mayor to occupy what has now become an independent branch of government, the executive branch, as opposed to what is the Richmond situation and the general council manager form of government, which is only 2 branches. You get the judicial, which is separate, and then you get a legislative branch that hires the manager. So in effect, you merge the executive into the legislative. And I demerged that, opened it up, split it, which is more consistent, which is consistent with the founding idea of the separation of powers, legislative from executive. And that was the essential idea. I do want to make a point here that I think is important, and that is, in all this discussion about the power, the role, the function, I want to make a statement about how little power there actually is. Now, there's power. I mean, that's true. But the powers of government in the American society, and possibly in modern government in general, but certainly true in this country, are highly restricted and hedged with all sorts of checks. I think back, since we're in Richmond, Virginia, I have to make a comment about Thomas Jefferson.
I told you to be careful.
I know I'm careful, but I believe his first postmaster was a man named Gideon Granger, who initiated the spoils system. And by the way, I do have to make just one more little comment. Should I defer to that?
Yeah, we had that conversation, Jerry.
I'll leave that out, because Gideon Granger...
He's been going at it all day like this.
He changed the employment policies of the post office, much to the disfavor of a certain group that was no longer allowed to work in the post office, but I don't know whether I should make that completely explicit. But anyway, in other words, he took African Americans out of the post office, and so that was a Jefferson original, through the postmaster. But the point I want to make is the postmaster started this idea of the friends of, not the friends of Bill, but the friends of Tom. And this was the beginning of the spoils system. Now that spoils system was taken to perfection under Andrew Jackson, and it continued until 1880 when people came up with this idea, 1890, with civil service. And they decided we've had enough of all this corruption and everybody's political pal being on the payroll. Let's get some people who know what they're doing, and they put in civil service. And then that became, as a matter of fact, the civil service then went to the next step and became the city manager. And the idea of civil service and city manager is to make politics free of politicians. To take the politics out of politics. That's the theory. And as you can tell the way I state that proposition, to state it is to refute it. Anyway, so we get this civil service, which we all live under. You can't fire anybody unless they're guilty of you know, you have to have a major evil. You really got to do something pretty serious. And then we get unions. You don't have that in Virginia, I guess, but out there in the West, we do have many unions, and they overlay that. So you can't be fired because you're in civil service. You can't be fired because you're in a union, and you can't hire unless you're on a list. You can't get on a list unless you go through an exam, and the exams are only taken every 6 months, and it takes endless amount of time to hire anybody. So the whole process is quite cumbersome, and it isn't about like you do in private enterprise where you manage to an objective, you don't meet it, heads roll, they roll sometimes under Mr. Bobb, but in general, not much. You got to take things as it's pretty static, and you don't have all that much power. There's not many. It's a chess game with few moves, and we're very reactive. And it's true of the mayor, it's true of the manager, it's true of the governor, it's true of the president. And if you haven't been close in and really rub your nose into government, you think these people have all this power. In truth, most of the decisions are predetermined, and you have a little small zone of discretion. And I don't know whether that we'll have a chance to explore what is that zone. But most of this stuff is predetermined, either by law, by custom, by racial balance, harmony, by political considerations, by media expectations, whatever. So you get the power, but the power is more to perform the expected function of the power. And when things go wrong, if you can, you blame somebody else. If you can't, then somebody else gets your job, and they try the same thing, and it continues down the way. But there's not as much power unless there's a crisis. And if there's a crisis, like a depression or a war, then you get a little more discretion. But garden variety day to day, it's pretty predictable, and it isn't like one of these corporations where the stockholders aren't happy, they throw the person out. No, we're there.
Sure, but given that as a background, and given the dialogue about you guys coming together collaboratively, let's talk about, if you would, and then I'm going to ask anyone who has questions to go to the mics. Let's talk a little bit about it, if you would, the challenges or the successes you've had with this collaborative leadership and some of the challenges you've had in Oakland. I mean, what are some of the success stories you can say, you know, we've developed?
Crime rate is down last year 20%. In California, it went up 3% in cities over 100,000. That's a major triumph. People are returning to the inner city to live, market rate housing, the beginning of retail for the first time in 20 years downtown. Those are all new businesses, 10,000 jobs in Oakland the last 2 years. I'd say those are all, you know, real comeback kind of things, and so that's all good. And
Still some of your real challenges that you still see.
Crime, poverty, you know, stagnation, the city council, these are all problems. No, I don't mean that.
He doesn't mean that. City council.
Yeah, no,
They have to approve our budget in the next few
okay,
months.
here's the deal is when you have all these people representing districts, then they are very cued, they're sensitive to that district. And if 50 people from that district come down at a council meeting, make a lot of noise, or if 300 people come down, that's a fraction of the city. but it's certainly from the point of view of television and the mood, kind of the what I call the micro-universe of unreality of that momentary council meeting, it has weight in reality. So therefore, they're very sensitive to that. And if that predominates, you tend to get a lot of cross pressure. It's not that one is right and one is wrong, but they're all kind of trying to keep everybody happy and bobbing and weaving, and not a lot gets done. You need the hammer. The hammer can be the manager, but not if he's the employee of the council. But that's why the mayor-manager forum, I think, is working very well at this particular moment.
The other issues too, I mean, Jerry makes a good point. The other issue, of course, is that the way our city is structured, we have 8 members on the city council, but as a citizen of Oakland, I have 3 bites at the apple in terms of addressing my issues before the city council. First of all, the mayor is elected at large, and therefore, as a citizen, I've given this person my vote, therefore I've given this individual my mandate in terms of how I look and view the issues of the city overall. So I have that's my first bite at the apple. The second bite at the apple is that of the 8 members of city council, one of those individuals is also elected at large. So in Oakland, we have 2 individuals who are elected at large, the mayor and an at-large member of city council. So on citywide issues, as a citizen, I can go to the mayor who's elected at large, and also I can go to the city council member who's elected at large. And then the third bite at the apple, of course, is I live in a particular part of the city, and therefore I have a city council member who represents my particular district. And therefore I have 3 shots at addressing the public policy issues that I'm most concerned with. And I think as we look at the urban cities today, the issues in the urban communities, while economic development and new capital is first and foremost, the major challenges that many of the urban cities face is whether or not they're able to deal with the human problems and the human issues within those communities. And therefore, you really need strong leadership. It really becomes a leadership issue if you're going to move your community forward. In terms of some of the additional successes, is that we negotiate a lot of economic development deals, little deals from microloans to million square feet deals to movie deals to whatever. But we can always rely on the mayor to be our pitch person, or to pick up the phone and call the CEO of this company or that company. And so the mayor plays a very important role in in the economic new investment, as it were, in our community. And I know in California, there are very few cities where, I can't think of any, as a matter of fact, maybe Jerry Oliver can, where the mayor is appointed by the members of the city council. In most of the cities, the mayor is elected at large. And as I reflect back on my experience here in Richmond, if there ever is to be a change, I think the mayor should be elected at large and have a citywide mandate. I'm not advocating anything. I'm just saying that you should consider that. That's up to the citizens of the community to decide that. But having the mayor elected at large gives the community, someone on that city council a citywide mandate, and someone who can represent the city at large, and then serve as the bully pulpit, and as it were, when there are issues that are important to the community to move the community forward. The second one is having city council members elected every 2 years, I think, is problematical in a lot of communities, and they're changing from 2 years to 4 years. Many times individuals are elected to city council for the first time, and it takes them almost 2 years to learn the difference between their role as policymakers and their non-interference role in administration. And by the time they get through that first year, they're already looking towards taking safe votes, as it were, so that they can ensure their next reelection. And so some serious consideration should be given to having city council members elected at large. Now, at the end of the day, you know, it's up to the citizens of the community to determine the structure, as it were, for its community.
Well, the purpose of this obviously is to get some interaction from you in terms of the audience. That's what we wanted to do. So I'm going to ask anyone who wants to ask some questions, and if they would come up to the mics, and we'll start the process.
Can I get to ask the mayor a question?
Yeah, you can.
Well, I wanted to ask the mayor this question for a long time. Now, because everyone asked me this question, what's it like being mayor versus governor?
It's more direct, more in your face, more on the governor is more abstract. You talk about things like education or crime, and the discussion is about a law or some funding formula, whereas mayor, crime is a murder or a rash of burglaries in a given neighborhood. Education is this high school, this success, this failure. They're very concrete. The other is far more abstract. So you're dealing more with citizens, more with development as mayor. As governor, you're dealing more with legislators, lobbyists, and media types. So it's more derivative.
Sure. Let me then just sort of shift gears a little bit. Robert, you were talking earlier, we chatted earlier about some of the things that are happening in terms of something you guys are doing in terms of revenue sharing that's unique. I mean, we're a city that's landlocked, and one of our challenges continue to be resources coming to the city. Share with the group some of the things you guys have done from your side of it that makes it so that you can, in fact, bring resources into the city.
Yeah, in a few months, William Hutnock, the former mayor of Indianapolis, will have a new book out where he has examined revenue sharing concepts in different cities across the United States. We have a unique relationship with the city of Emeryville. Now, Emeryville is a city of about 1.7 square miles, but its economic development power is powerful. It is an economic engine unto itself, and that city's borders are contiguous to the city of Oakland. And what we have with the city of Emeryville is that as development occurs along our borders, we share in the revenues. For example, our city staff, or my city staff, mayor's city staff, were very instrumental in recruiting a new IKEA store to our city. And we could not place IKEA in the city of Oakland. The only place IKEA could go is in the city of Emeryville, which is on our borders. Part of their facilities, their operations would be in Emeryville and part in the city of Oakland. And we worked with the city of Oakland to bring IKEA, and that particular store is open, and it's one of the most profitable IKEAs in the world. But we share 40% of the revenue from that store, and Emeryville shares 60%. Now, what is interesting, in a few weeks I'll be renegotiating that deal with the city manager, because IKEA is in the process of developing a $25 million parking structure, and the parking structure, although it will be developed in the city of Oakland and will receive all of the permit fees, we're going to renegotiate that particular deal and look for a larger split on this IKEA deal. But all along, the city manager of Emeryville just recently told me that, according to his finance director, the city of Emeryville is the largest taxpayer in the city of Oakland. A lot of big box development, hotels along our borders, residential complexes along our borders, and we share both in property taxes and in sales taxes. And that's a very unique partnership. With the city of San Leandro, another city along our borders, that city, when it recruits major companies to that city, it doesn't have the employment base. So we have a relationship with that city where we use our workforce staff to recruit citizens from our community for jobs, and we train them for jobs in the city of San Leandro. So all along our borders we have, very unique pacts with our bordering cities. Now, we also fight with them also, but in that instance we are sharing in revenues.
Okay, questions from the audience? And if you could come to the mic, again, we are taping this. And so, Brother Towns.
Thank you. This question is really directed at my friend Robert Bobb. And I say that sincerely. We're fraternity brothers. I saw Oakland lose to Baltimore out in Oakland because of Robert Bobb. Wonderful experience, although my team lost, Oakland. And I've known the governor for a long time. When you came to Richmond, Mr. Bobb, I was an advocate in 1986, 87 of a change in our government to elect a mayor, a leader, because I thought it was essential for a city like Richmond to have such. Since you've been in Oakland, I heard you say something tonight that amazed me. Thank you, Mr. Brown. But if you were still in Richmond, what strategy would you use to try to bring forth a change in our government to have a more effective city mayor-manager form of government?
That's easy. None. Seriously, it's really the movement for in Oakland's case it's a lot different from a lot of other places because the mayor, Jerry Brown, decided that he wanted to change and he wanted more power. So an individual became the driving force. In many communities, it's the community leadership that becomes the driving force for change. And as you'll recall, the citizens of Richmond a few years back did support an initiative to have the mayor elected at large, and that initiative failed to win approval at the General Assembly. So it seems to me that this community needs to do a lot of work with its General Assembly representatives. Now, the other part of that, of course, is that the argument here is that by having a mayor elected at large, it'd be difficult to have an African American elected. And of course, Richmond is still under the Voters' Rights Act, and I'm not quite sure how that would fit into having a mayor elected at large. But when we look at communities across this country, in very large communities, there are significant cities where African Americans are serving as mayors of those cities with a very low African American population. On the West Coast, I could point to the city of San Francisco, where African Americans are in the true minority. I could point to the city of Cleveland, Ohio. I could point to the city of Houston, Texas, where you have African American mayors. The city of Denver, Colorado, where there's an African American mayor. And I think if you, there was a survey, and I don't know the actual numbers, but you probably should get hold of a survey that was done by the Black Mayors Conference, and it shows, I think, like 23% of all mayors, African American mayors in large cities, are elected. African Americans are elected mayor in those cities where the African American population is the lowest among the population.
There are cities where the African American population is like Richmond, and they too, under the Voters' Rights Act, have elected very strong and powerful and effective mayors. Some of them haven't been African Americans. So, but you would have a strategy, I know, to lead us, as you did for 10 magnificent years, to come forward with the proper form of government, would you not? Thank you.
I'm very happy with my...
All right. Okay.
The only place I want to leave right now, Clarence, is the city of Oakland. And
Okay, let's, our next question.
Yeah, short comment to lead into the question. It seems to me that so much economic development that I see commonly ends up meaning huge tax-subsidized projects like 6th Street Marketplace. And it seems the problem is there's pseudo-public city planning groups like Richmond Renaissance who get to congratulate, for example, Councilperson Hedgepeth at a 3 o'clock land use meeting, how great it is that the city spent $2.3 million that was supposed to go into the Department of Public Utilities, could have helped with gas, instead bought Tallheimers.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to, the purpose of this is to ask the question.
Oh, there's a question.
And then we will go ahead and process it through if you don't mind.
Right. All right. Well, I'll shorten it up then. what things, I've heard in style that California has much more strict requirements on what it is the government has to, sunshine laws, what the city has to give out to the public. Maybe this land use committee meeting would have been televised on Channel 57 under California sunshine laws, and in Richmond it's not. What other examples are there where there are things that the city is doing, meetings they're having, that in California would have to be much more public? That's my question.
Well, yeah, we have these sunshine laws, but don't get too excited about those. You can't do anything without giving 2 weeks' notice, and if you change your mind, then you got to wait another 2 weeks, and then you get an alteration, another 2 weeks. It's very, very cumbersome. So that's a reform that creates its own problem. Now, secrecy, that's also a problem. So it's like in so many things, there's this, the unintended consequences. So you do have to look at trying to, making things public. They should be out there. In terms of economic development, for the most part, Oakland puts up very little money. It's all private sector investment because there's a lot of money spilling over from Silicon Valley and San Francisco, and it's an excellent location. But there are times when you need to prime the pump, and you got to put some public money on the table. And that's just a matter, that makes sense sometimes, if you can generate more than you have to put up. I mean, that's all there is. So some deals make sense, some deals don't make sense. They ought to be open, and hopefully people are going to be wise about how they proceed.
Yeah, I'd like to respond a little bit to the sunshine issues. We have some of the toughest open meetings requirements in any community that I'm familiar with. I mean, it doesn't take 2 weeks. It actually takes 4 weeks to get an item to City Council. For example, the City Council has a Rules Committee, and a Rules Committee is a committee of 4 or 5 members of City Council. They in the City Manager's office determines the agenda items to go on the City Council's agenda, and members of the public can also attend a Rules Committee meeting and request that an item be placed before the City Council. That item, when an item is on the agenda, it goes to a committee of City Council, and all of the City Council committee meetings are televised live, gavel to gavel. The mayor, let me give you a case in point. I mean, and so every item that goes before the City Council must be published for X number of days on the city's website, city's libraries. We send out over 300 packets of council materials to members of the public, but it does become a fairly cumbersome process. And I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, when the FBI put out its report on the most violent cities in the United States, 3 years ago, Oakland was on the radar screen, as it were. And we've made some changes in our public safety department, our police department since then. 2 weeks ago, when that report came out on a Monday, we wanted to celebrate our success because we had the most significant drop in violent crimes than any city in California, of over 100,000. So we had a significant turnaround. And we wanted to go before City Council at its Tuesday meeting to have the Chief of Police give a report. I mean, it was something to celebrate. We could not place that item on the City Council's agenda because it had not been properly agendized. The public had not had an opportunity to review the data, as it were. And so that's one of the problems with our sunshine law. So the way we got the Chief of Police before the City Council, before each City Council meeting, we have the public comment period, which is a very interesting time. And so we had to give the Chief of Police, we had to have the police chief sign the little card to appear before the City Council to give a report on a significant reduction in crime. So the meeting that you attended today, if it wasn't properly agendized for 4 weeks, it would never occur in the city of Oakland. And if it did occur, it would be on television.
Okay. Another question.
I would just like to say that I think their paper had an article just recently that said there were 34 African American mayors in this country, and in 20 of those cases, the African American population was outnumbered by the white population. I thought that was a pretty interesting thing. And I guess my question is, Bob, is if you were here in Richmond and we were considering an at-large mayor like this, would you advocate the strong mayor as you have there? And they also, I know that Governor Wilder has sort of proposed the idea of an elected mayor with, he suggests 3 at-large. So first of all, the first question is, do you like that 3 bites of the apple which you mentioned, the strong mayor, and your other observations about the at-large?
Well, very definitely, I feel that the cities like Richmond and other communities should have its mayor elected at large, because the mayor's office provides the overall leadership. So very definitely. Now, whether you change from the council manager to the strong mayor, that's really a decision that the community would have to make after giving it some very careful consideration. I think I'm not aware. What Jerry Brown has done in Oakland, I think, is very unique. I mean, when I go around the country or attend some of my meetings, and everyone wants to know what's happening in Oakland, people are now writing about what's happening in Oakland. I'm not certain you're going to see that happen in other communities where a very strong personality comes into a community, rewrites the city charter, gets it before the voters, puts up enough money to get the petitions passed and get the item before the voters, and then launch a very strong campaign. But I think in Oakland, our city was ripe for change. I mean, the initiative, there were 2 previous attempts to change from the council manager to a strong mayor. Both of those attempts failed. The League of Women Voters came out very strongly in support, in opposition to the 2 previous attempts. This time when Measure X, I mean, I think the community, timing is everything. And I think the time was right in Oakland for the change to occur based on a number of events that had happened in the past in the community.
Okay, another question, but just to remind you that we are going to wrap this up shortly, so you want to get your questions going, and I'm going to ask my panelists here to keep their answers semi-short in the process so we can get some of the questions asked. The other thing is just to remind you, too, that they did leave Oakland just before Oakland was scheduled to be part of the blackout. So they are smart politicians, but they are... Next question.
I'm going to break the chain about asking questions about internal governmental mechanics and maybe talk about policy and leadership for a moment. I was really encouraged in learning about the Oakland 10K project, your initiative. I'm sure you can do a better job explaining it than I can. And I happen to work for our state housing finance authority. And I'm wondering what type of partnerships you've developed with your housing finance authority to encourage low and moderate income housing development in the city. And secondly, what is the risk you're running of gentrification in Oakland? And I know there's been some comment in Oakland specifically about the concern about that. And how are you balancing the private and public partnerships to ensure that you have a good blend of development? And one last question, this is just personal curiosity, but I'll let you answer those.
You're 3. Now what's the 4th?
The 4th had to do with for commercial development, employing a program that I understand. I'd like to learn more about it. That is modeled after the residential low-income housing tax credit program, and I know that's an initiative you do have in Oakland. And I'd like, just being a policy person that I am, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Okay, so that's a distinction from the first 3. Just a particularization of affordability or low income. Right. Okay, we got to get. I want to translate this into the way things work. When you build so-called affordable housing, you build unaffordable housing, and then you reach out to somebody, your sugar daddy, the federal government, the state government, the tax credits, somebody, and then you give away a subsidy of $150,000. That's the way it works in Oakland. If you don't have $150,000, you cannot take what it costs to build a unit on the expensive land that is the situation in the Bay Area, and then make it available for somebody who's going to be able to afford it. So when you talk about blending, it's just money. It's just pure money. Because you build it for you know, 300 grand, and you got to have 150,000, so you sell it for half of what it's worth, and you make up the difference by somebody kicking in the money. And the city has a certain amount of money. We don't have much surplus, and we can put in some. You have these tax credits that were cooked up under Reagan. They're another source, and then, but there's limited source. They only have a few, a very small amount. So the whole notion of 10K, K is kill something, it's a Greek, I think, that means thousands. So 10,000 people downtown. The idea of people downtown was to get some people with money. Because then if you have people with money living downtown, you might get a department store. Right now we got Sears, that's it. That's it. They don't have any shopping downtown. Even our Starbucks closes at 6 on Friday, doesn't open until Monday at Monday morning. This thing's dead. We got more pigeons at City Plaza on the weekend than we do people. So we got to get some people, some money. So then when you get money, then you get your next question, gentrification. What's that? We got all these rich people coming in. Well, what happened is the middle class left 25 years ago. Then the poor people came in. Then the drug addicts came in. Then child molesters came in. Then the parolees came in. Then the alcoholics came in. And we created one little happy venue. And then all these service centers came in, try to treat them and medicate them and therapeuticize them or whatever they have to do. And so they're all there. And that's and we have 35% of the housing subsidized. So I say, let us have some diversity. Let's let a few rich people come in. Okay, so that's the idea. Of course, what rich person in their right mind wants to live down there? That's a whole other problem. So, you know, we got to kind of clean it up in the police and all that kind of stuff. But it's, I mean, I get frustrated when I hear gentrification. So we have slumification, we have gentrification. But why can't we have something down the middle? So, and I don't think we're going to displace, we're going to enrich. And that's why we're creating the jobs. So it's not easy. And most of the money, 95% of the money, is good old-fashioned, dirty, capitalistic money. And that kind of money wants to get a return. And if it doesn't get a return, it goes somewhere else. It's just that simple. It's not like I'm King Canute and I can say to the waves, go out. No. The money comes in if the money is going to take more out, if it gets a profit. So you got to have the profit. To have the profit, you got to have a sound government. It's got to be honest. It has to work. And then along the way, as we get richer, then we can afford more subsidies for affordability, and everything works right. And we get shopping. We get to have open on the weekend. More people walking around. Less crime. Everything's better. Okay, that's the way I see it. But there is another view called downtown Oakland is the epicenter of the gentrification bomb. That's the rhetorical excess of my opposition, but don't worry, they're very few, and I think the next election will prove how marginal they really are, even though the cause is good. It's good to have, I mean, it is good to have affordability, but, you know, you can say everybody wants to buy a house more than they can afford, but we got to do it with limits because we also have recreation and police and fire and redevelopment and potholes, and we got to do everything. We can't put all the money into subsidizing housing for people who can't afford the housing that costs in that part of the world.
And just in case you didn't write all of this down, you can catch it again on April 4th at part of WCE.
Okay. So
Bob just said that to really make these communities work, you have to have capital. I mean, when you study those communities where there have been major turnaround in those communities, capital with a capital C, and you have to bring in new investors into the community. And and to be successful in bringing in new investors, you have to drive crime down. You have to snuff it out. You have to make the community safe, because no one's going to make significant investments in any of these urban cities, whether it's Oakland or Richmond, unless the crime issues are addressed. And our number one goal is to put significant investments in our crime-fighting efforts. I mean, we're spending $138 million a year on police services, and we believe we need another 200 police officers to police our city. We have the same number of police officers in Oakland as you have here in the city of Richmond, and we're a city of 400,000 people and surrounded by, what, 6 or 7 million individuals. So you drive the crime down, you bring in new investments. One of the things we're discussing is to actually go and talk to various companies across the country that have capital. It's going to bring more money. What is estimated, Jerry, that we need?
400 million at least.
At least 400 million in new capital to continue the revitalization of Oakland.
Billion.
Yeah, it's a couple of billion. It's a couple of billion. 400 million we can live with.
That's too small.
So we're actually going after the capital markets. You have to go after the capital markets. And on this issue of affordable housing, I mean, we've structured deals where we've put together a $40 million bond issue just for affordable housing that we dole out to community-based organizations to develop affordable housing. We've brokered a deal with Bank of America for a $1 billion housing program in the city of Oakland over the next 5 years. We've additionally brokered a similar deal with Wells Fargo Bank for $1 billion of housing credits over the next 5 years. And part of the Wells Fargo deal is we're able to put people in homes with no money down, addressing the affordability component. But some gentrification is absolutely needed to at least turn our city around.
Yeah, here's one of the iron laws of capitalism. If things get better, the price goes up. If things get worse, the price tends to go down. So if you can keep your crime high and your schools crummy, you can have very affordable housing. If you fix your schools and you reduce your crime, everything's going to get more expensive. So what do you want? You want the problems of prosperity, or you want the problems of whatever, the opposite? You know, I mean, the problems of things going bad. And that's true. Now, maybe there's some ways you can square that circle, but not everything in life works the way you might like it. And there are trade-offs, real, genuine trade-offs. And you have to decide, what do you like least? Or what do you like best?
You, question on this side here.
Yes, thank you. My question is really prompted by a comment from Mr. Bobb. You mentioned the previous mayor of Indianapolis. Indianapolis is a city that really took off, and it is a powerhouse now. I think most people would agree. But the thing that really prompted Indianapolis' growth was basically a plan called Unigov that united the surrounding counties with the inner city of Indianapolis. I guess my question is more a chicken or egg question. When we talk about a strong mayor elected by a unified constituency, to what extent are we actually talking about regionalism and a coordination among your surrounding, say, county governments becoming one solid government to make that mayorship truly the strength it needs to be to put a city on the national map?
I think Indianapolis is unique in its Unigov. However, I don't think you need Unigov to have a mayor who's elected at large to help drive the community's agenda forward. You don't need that structure. I mean, it's nice. I mean, I just can't imagine the city of Oakland consolidating its government with Alameda County. And perhaps it could. I don't think Jerry would be able to pull that one off. If he does, let's put it in shrining. But I just don't know, Gil.
Also, I think we're talking about, it's not the mayor that gets things rolling. I can provide some cheerleading and some illusions of success and prosperity and whatever. But the key is the individual mind, whether collaborating with other people or not. But when I hear Unigov, I don't know what I think of. Unisex, it doesn't seem like it has a lot of power to it. You know, Unigov, I mean, because we're talking about leadership, and these students are supposed to be writing something down here. Leadership comes out of a spirit of an individual. You have to have the something. When Steve Jobs, back when I didn't even know, but when I was Secretary of State getting ready for governor, there's a guy named Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak who were working in their backyard on something that became the Apple I, the Apple II. And there was a guy named Bob Noyce who invented the microprocessor a couple of miles away at Stanford. There's Packard, and these people have started the Packard, Hewlett-Packard. So it's people with ideas that come up with things. And you know, whether it's you know, Yahoo or eBay or whatever, you invent things. Government doesn't invent anything. Government's job is to get in the way and slow down the excess of individual creativity. That's the function. Because sometimes individuals go to excess. And so a government, all it can do is be honest. It can't be creative. It's not creativity is by its nature unusual, unpredictable. It's not politically correct. It doesn't fit into all these rules that you have to follow in government. It's not civil service. It's not union representation. It's the unadulterated, unconstrained soaring of the human imagination. And that's going to be outside government. So that's the key. You want those people. I mean, what made Florence, Florence, or Athens, Athens? They didn't have millions of people. Athens had 40,000 citizens, and Florence had probably 60,000 active people. It doesn't take a lot of people. It takes people with brains, genius, creativity. And that's what, if you can attract that, make it so it's attractive, that's what you got to do. So you can throw all the money you want at something, but if it is according to some government program, you bet most of it will be, it'll all get somehow circulated around to produce exactly what is. So government tends to reproduce what is, whereas individuals can create what isn't. And that's the difference between leadership and what we do in government.
Good point there. Just one minute as we go on to the next one here. Just one quick one, just since we're here. Before you go on, just one quick one that's been sort of pulled up before. You've had a chance to tour Richmond. What's your impressions of Richmond?
I haven't seen enough yet. It looks like a pretty good town. I must say it's a little quiet yesterday. I was down at the Jefferson Hotel. It wasn't a little quiet down. It looked a little bit like Oakland on a Wednesday night. So, yeah, it looks very nice. I like the old buildings. It looks a little bit like Oakland.
Yeah, a little bit like Oakland with powers down. Go ahead.
I like to see it. I like to see the sun shining.
Fair enough.
This question is for Mayor Brown. You've talked a lot about the challenges of leadership tonight and collaboration as mayor and as governor. When you were governor as CEO, did you find yourself a lot receiving calls from mayors and from city and county leaders talking about getting their fair share of the state budget, earthquakes, whatever the case may have been? And now as mayor, do you find yourself calling Sacramento, doing the same thing, and has it made you more either sympathetic or critical of Mr. Davis?
You know what? I didn't pay attention to mayors when I was governor. And now that I'm mayor, I don't pay attention to the state government. I'm not counting on government. I'm counting on the flow of good old-fashioned private capital. And as long as that flows in, we flow up. And if you wait for government and all, you get a little crumb, and then you got to have a press conference, and then they want to audit you, they want to control it. It's Mickey Mouse. That's never going to catch it. The waves of government are too small. Unless there's a depression and you get a Franklin Roosevelt or a war and you do something big. Most of the time, it's Mickey Mouse. It's just a little thing here and a little event. It's a photo op. It's a photo op with a few crumbs. And we don't need that. We want major capital inflows with international trade and movement of people. That's exciting. We want to be a crossroads in the real world, not some kind of, with our tin cup out. I remember going to one of these Washington guys, I won't mention his name because it's kind of famous, and you know what he said when I went back to as mayor? I'd never had this experience as governor. I never asked the federal government for anything because California's big and rich, and we didn't realize we were dependent on the defense budget and a few other odds and ends. I went back to this guy, in the cabinet official, and he said, don't be ashamed to show your tin cup. And I didn't understand. Yeah, just what do you want? We want to put some money in your tin cup. And the reason is the federal government, other than the military and a few other things, they don't do anything. They got to send money to the cities or the states in order for something to go on, or they don't even have any photo ops to attend. And so I don't know where I go with that, other than the fact that cities is where things happen. It has to be in a specific place. So when you say ask the governor, I mean, the governor needs people to be doing stuff because the governor, it's a theater of political gesture. That's what it is. And they're at 20,000 feet. Down here, we're on the playing field, where we got drive-bys and schools and developments or no development. That's where it is. So the city's an exciting place. Oakland's a comeback city. I think Richmond has been coming back ever since, not Bob left, but Bob arrived. So that's all I would say. Don't forget about the governor. You know why? Because you got a lot of other cities, they'll lobby for you. And whatever they do, they got to do for all the cities. So you don't need, you can be a free rider. Just travel on other people's lobbyists.
And you can probably imagine, based on his animation, that when he has a press conference, 10,000 people show up. So,
Depends on what I say.
all right, next question.
Visionary and the expert as Governor Brown, you were well known for the renewable sources of energy. In regard to California's crisis now, which threatens the rest of us, would you say a few words, please?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of words. When we had, 20 years ago, hundreds of millions of dollars of conservation programs wherein the Public Regulatory Commission would require the utilities to provide conservation incentives. People who bought efficient refrigerators, people who reduced their power demand and all the rest, they threw all that out. And then they didn't build any more power plants. So it was just a matter, and then they keep using more energy. California's been growing. When I was governor, California had 22 million people. Now it has 35 million. They up until the dot-com collapse, they were coming in pretty rapidly. So that's the problem. The energy, they didn't invest in the conservation, they didn't invest in the alternatives, and they didn't invest in even the conventional power plants. So they are a little short. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of waste that they're only short by 5 or 8%, and with a little bit of conservation, a few more power plants, they ought to be able to, and a few higher prices, they'll probably cover it.
What are the prospects of wind energy, geothermal energy? I know you were strong on those points.
Well, wind energy now is 5 cents a kilowatt hour, and in California we're paying like 13, 14 cents a kilowatt hour, and they're charging 25 cents on some of these spot market transactions. So yeah, wind power, there's enough wind energy in 10 Midwestern states to provide electricity for the entire country. But you have to invest in it, and you have to organize it, and but it can be done. Wind energy is a great alternative. Geothermal is more limited. Because it depends upon what's under the earth. We have that in California. We have a little more, not that much more. The biggest buy is the watt you don't use, negawatts. That's a tremendous waste, and that's the biggest gain. But there is plenty of fuel cells, alternative energy. All that stuff, though, takes investment. And so I think there's a lot to be had there. And I think we better worry about global warming. Contrary to W, there is a lot of CO2 going up there.
Just quickly, California energy crisis is it's interesting. Dr. Musgrove, whom many of you know, he's negotiating with a company to manufacture windmills in the city of Oakland. And that would create almost 8,000 jobs if we were able to make that happen. So there's somewhat of an economic benefit to the energy crisis. But we're also feeling it in terms of the cost, not only to citizens, but also to the cost of government.
One last question, if we could, about
Yeah, I would probably be more familiar, Mr. Bobb would be more familiar with this topic. However, I would like your comments also, Governor Brown, and that it's a combined scenario and then a question. The CSO system, the combined sewer overflow in the city of Richmond, it's been a problem since, probably the Civil War era, probably actually the colonial times. And I understand, I heard the B word thrown around recently that $1 billion has been spent on it so far, and from the work I've done in my master's studies at VCU, we determined just by published reports, the 305 report from the EPA, that there are several locations in Richmond in the James River Park between the Nickel Bridge and Mayo Bridge where the water is considered unswimmable. One place there's fish lesions, and what they've done with their whatever amount of money they've spent has been to pipe some of these things together, and then when we have a sewer overflow system like we're definitely having tonight in this kind of rain, it doesn't get pumped out in several places. It just gets pumped out at the Mayo Bridge, and that's, you wouldn't want to put your hand in the water down there. And that's also where the city wonderful canal walk is, that's attracting so much business and activity, and just so much going on down there. So my question is, what would you do about it? You know, we've got these billion-dollar problems here in Richmond, and nobody seems to even want to talk about it.
I'd stress bottled water myself.
Well, I think sometimes, I recall when the whole issue of combined sewer started here, and in the mayor's conference room, or the city manager's conference room, we really started the CSO partnership and working with other communities. But it does take significant financing, and I know there is a plan in the community here to implement the combined sewer overflow program. And so, you know, I would say see the city manager at the end of the meeting.
I want to just wrap, if you would, wrap some of that up because of the fact that the number is not $1 billion, just for the record. But still, I know that our panelists here have to depart, so I'm going to ask you one last question, what has to do, and then we'll wrap things up. And that has to do with you haven't said anything about schools or education and the challenges that you have in the city of Oakland versus.
I was going to go talk about composting if I had a chance.
He shifted that part.
First of the matter, I just don't want to get into a big picture, but we waste a lot of waste. And this stuff could be recycled, it can be reused, and the key is reduce, reuse, and recycle. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. We're a very wasteful society. So there's a lot of things that can be done. That's the good news. The bad news, it probably costs a lot of money to get ourselves organized to do just that. So virtue is not cheap. Now, you want a summary?
Just a summary in terms of your other challenges you're facing with regards to, I mean, and we talked earlier about our challenges with school systems and what makes it so that you can attract those people back into your cities.
Well, I think the people who go to the cities first are the urban pioneers, the artists, and the people who want that urban experience, that go to the suburbs, get tired of the traffic, it's kind of boring, everybody's the same. You know, they just say, well, we've had it. We want to get down to the city, more diversity, a little more chaos, a little more congestion, but it's more exciting. And so, you know, there's a lot to be said for the urban life. And as more people come back, then it feeds on itself. And that is actually happening. And I'm not going to talk about schools because that'd be a whole nother deal. And thing with schools, I got to put in a thing about that. You know, people, the most learning, you know, when the baby, when the newborn descends the birth canal, that child has to learn very fast. Air breathing, or she is in big trouble, right? Learning is built into the organism until something screws it up. So we're inherent learners. We're curious. We're learning all the time. And in fact, some woman wrote a book called The Scientist in the Crib. And they found out the small child is propounding hypotheses, evaluating evidence, and learning all the time. I mean, learning how to speak, making sense out of words is incredible. Little children have are smarter than everybody in this room in terms of learning languages. They can learn 3 languages just like that. So there's a lot of learning power. And there's this mythology that everybody's ignorant until you get this thing called education and they pour it into your head. Well, that's why kids don't want to learn. So I would say education is the problem of education. And what we got to do is, I mean, I think it's up to each one, and particularly those who have children, to create that environment of learning and curiosity and exploration, because that's what's natural until it's frustrated and repressed by these institutional arrangements, which are for babysitting, sorting, and making sure the unequal social structure continues for another 200 years.
That's it. Well, it is clear. I apologize. Yeah, that's it. We're out of time. And I want to take this opportunity. You can see why the B&B combination of Brown and Bobb, or better known as the Killer Bees, that they've often referenced in terms of Oakland. Let's give them a well-deserved round of applause. Robert, I want to welcome you back to Richmond. And while you're here, please leave us some money. You and And you and the mayor, if you would. But again, thank you and welcome back.
There are just a couple of closing remarks before you leave. One is that in leadership studies, we try to tell our students that they really can make a difference and they should grasp the difficult issues. I think our speakers tonight have shown our students and all of our audience that this is really possible. And the last thing is that the city of Oakland just this week has been named as one of the top 10 comeback cities. So we thank you all, and we thank you all for coming. And stay tuned. We'll be back next fall.